What's up guys, I got a brand new video for you today, and guess what? It's here finally. The A7Siii is in my hands. Clearly, I already unboxed it, but I didn't make a video about that. But I did post my unboxing image on Instagram if you want to check that out. It doesn't really matter because, you know, this just comes with the charger, the battery, the camera, the strap, the HDMI clip, and I said charger already. And that's basically all you need to know. I'm about to shoot with this camera. We're gonna head out and shoot some tests with it, try some ProRes RAW, some 4K 120 10-bit. I got this box here from Small Rig with a bunch of stuff, so there's the cage in here, and we'll take a look at what we got. Welcome to my podcast. I don't know why I'm using this mic. I guess because it's already set up and it's 3 a.m. So let's talk to it. Obviously, it's a first impression. So the images and video look great, but they're not like the best stuff ever. And I didn't have a lot of time with the camera. I will be shooting a full review where I actually get to use the camera in the real world. These are just some test images and some test footage. I think it's good enough to kind of get the idea of what the dynamic range looks like, what the new color science looks like, how well the ProRes RAW looks, as well as some stabilization stuff. I used autofocus on pretty much all of it, and it just worked amazing, so I'm not even really going to talk about the autofocus. But what I do want to talk about is the new gyro stabilization, where I showed the side-by-side. I was walking through sand, like not even holding it that stable, and it's crazy the magic that the Catalyst Browse software does with stabilizing the footage. There's a few things you need to know, though, before you actually get out and do that. You need to make sure that IBIS is turned off on the camera. You need to make sure that image stabilization on the lens is turned off, and you need to be shooting an A7Siii. If you shoot HS, it just doesn't work for some reason. I also feel like it's also a good place to talk about how well the rolling shutter is controlled in this camera. The sensor has a super fast readout, and there's hardly any rolling shutter at all. So obviously the gyro stabilization is amazing, and you can see from that test, it's crazy what it's doing. This also has active stabilization as well. So something that we saw in the new ZV-1, you can actually turn on like a digital stabilization on top of the IBIS, and it looks pretty good. I did some handheld tests here, and I was walking kind of side profile with her. It does kind of have like an unnatural look to it. It kind of gets a little jerky at times. It kind of reminds me of Fuji's IBIS actually. It doesn't look that great. I think it's better if you were to just kind of hold it still and use it more for like static shots where you're holding a still shot or doing a little bit of panning and stuff like that. I wouldn't really want to run with it. It still kind of looks unnatural. So taking a look at the dynamic range of the 10-bit 422 files shot in an S-Log3, look amazing off this camera. Obviously the new color science is there, but when you're shooting S-Log3, it's so flat that most Sony cameras, when you're shooting 8-bit, it just falls apart. It's not even worth using. But now that you have the higher bit rate as well as 10-bit 422 color space, you can actually utilize the S-Log3's dynamic range and get some really nice images. I'll admit that the stuff I shot isn't really all that dynamic, but you still get to see the highlights in the sky and the way the highlight rolls off, as well as the shadows in the image, and even the color as well. So it kind of gives us a good chance to look at that. Obviously, when I do my full review or some more tests, I'll be shooting in more real world situations, and I'll try and find more dynamic stuff to shoot in to see how well this holds up. So taking a look at the high ISO test, like everyone says, when it hits 12,800 ISO, it cleans up. It's really weird because Sony hasn't said that this has dual native ISO, but you'd think that it does. So it makes more sense to shoot at that than it does at 6400 ISO. Then I wanted to try some real low light stuff. So this was at 6400 ISO, kind of what it looked like to our eyes. And then I bumped up to 25,600 ISO, and it's crazy how good this looks, how good the color still looks as well. The other dope thing is that you're not limited to just 24 frames per second with the 10-bit 422. You can shoot all the way up to 120 frames per second if you want to, and that's 120 frames per second with audio. One of the other crazy specs of this camera is it can actually output 16-bit RAW through the HDMI, and when I first heard that rumored spec, I was like, nah, there's no way. It's going to be 16-bit RAW photos. They must have heard it wrong. But no, it can actually do it, which is crazy. It uses the new HDMI 2.1. There's just no recorder that can do it yet. So Atomos did a firmware update on the Ninja 5 to allow 12-bit log ProRes RAW out of this camera. So I did shoot with that, did some ProRes RAW as well as recording just 10-bit 422 at the same time, just to compare them to see what the difference is. And from what I can tell, the actual 10-bit 422 looked better. I used the S-Log3 LUT on it and did a little bit of corrections. But when I compared it to the ProRes RAW, the ProRes RAW actually looked overexposed and the highlights were blown and there was no way to recover it. So I don't know if it's just the way Premiere is handling these files right now, if it's not really ready for it, but it can play them. But I did notice in the highlight sections of her hair and stuff like that, it was actually blown out, where in the S-Log3 footage, it was still all there. The detail was all there. As well as color, they both look great. So I have no complaints there. I just don't know if ProRes RAW is really ready yet. The other thing I want to quickly talk about is photography, because obviously you know I'm a photographer. Amazing photo camera, 10 frames per second continuous shooting, amazing crazy eye detection autofocus, probably the best I've ever used, with a 12 megapixel sensor. So obviously it's not going to be the best for most client jobs. It might be fine for social media stuff or online, but the images that I did take actually look really good. The new color science, I shot everything just kind of in standard profile. The images in this video are just JPEGs and they look good. There's nothing wrong with them. There was lots of detail. Actually, when I punched in, I was surprised to see how well these images actually held up. Obviously, they're not 45 megapixel images from like a Canon R5, but it would be interesting to do a shootout. Let me know if you want to see that, the difference in comparisons there. But yeah, amazing photo camera, just you're gonna get small files. All that said, I'm blown away by what Sony was able to do with this camera. The new body, the bigger grip, fits your hand amazing, feels good in the hand. The new buttons feel really good. And obviously the flip screen. I don't really care too much about the flip screen, but we got a flip screen, a touch flip screen with touch in the menus, the entire new menu system. So if you've ever used Sony or used a Sony camera, you know that the file structure is terrible for video. It always starts at 0001, but now we can actually label the camera it's from, the time and date, and it'll have consecutive numbers. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a legendary camera for a long time. It's not cheap. It comes in at around $34.98, so basically $3,500. I do think it's worth every penny though. I do recommend this camera if you're shooting video. It's going to be a tool that you can just use. It's not going to get in the way, and that's kind of what you want in a camera. Anyway, if you're thinking about picking up this camera, I'll put links in the description, also to the cage that I used and some of the accessories and SD cards that I use for this thing. And yeah. Thanks for watching my podcast. That's it for this video. Obviously just a first impression, so don't get too hung up on the footage. I just need to use it in the real world on some jobs so I can kind of decide what quirks and weird things come up. I also want to say thanks to Veronica and Francis for helping out on this video. Everything was literally so last minute and it was awesome they were able to help me out on that. But that's it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike this video, give it a thumbs down twice. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. See you guys in the next one. That was my third time recording this entire thing because the first time everything messed up. So the second time things also messed up. So have fun watching the bloopers. 12 megapixels is the new 24 megapixels. Welcome to my podcast. Welcome to my podcast. A7S3 in my hand. Why did I say that? I don't even know. Hi, welcome to my podcast where I talk about all things cameras and cool stuff. And this was the only real day that I could shoot, so I'm making excuses, all right? I just got done looking up files, some IBIS tests, some things. Let's talk about it. Let's talk to it. And the A7S3 is here in the building.